Sitting in my car between meetings, I pulled up the home security camera feed on my phone and froze at the scene playing out right there on my living room sofa. The man I'd given my heart to was tenderly stroking the swollen belly of his pregnant mistress. Through the speaker, my mother-in-law's shrill voice cut through the air like a knife. She said she regretted with every fiber of her being the day she'd let a barren, useless woman like me into their family. My husband chimed right in, wrapping his arms around his little homewrecker, cooing sweet nothings. He promised that once he'd tricked me out of every asset I owned, he'd kick his fake, useless wife to the curb and bring the two of them home. The darkness of the human heart, my friends, it's terrifying. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment to watch me strike back. Let me show you just how miserably this ruthless family ended up. I sat frozen in the driver's seat of my luxury car, parked in the underground garage of my company's headquarters. The phone screen kept replaying the audio from the security camera installed in the living room of our riverfront mansion. Every word from my mother-in-law and the man I called my husband drilled deeper into my soul. Sharp and cruel, like thousands of poisoned needles stabbing straight into my bleeding heart. Eat more of the bird's nest soup, dear. Keep my grandchild healthy. Then, with a sneer, God, every time I think about that dried-up, barren wife of Tyler's, I regret it to my core. The piercing, venomous words of Patricia, the mother-in-law I'd bent over backward to serve for 7 long years, rang out crystal clear. She was spooning premium bird's nest soup that cost me about $600 a serving from a high-end specialty shop, pampering a woman who was essentially a stranger to me. Then came Tyler's mocking laugh. My husband, the man I'd poured the best years of my life into loving and supporting. Don't worry, babe. Once I trick her into signing over her shares, I'll kick that useless wife out and bring you home. A woman who can't even have kids is only good for the trash. He spoke while running his hand over Tiffany's protruding belly, his eyes overflowing with affection he hadn't shown me in years. My ears rang. Blood rushed to my head, my temples throbbing with every heartbeat. The air inside the car grew so suffocating, I thought I might suffocate. My throat burned. I wanted to scream, to howl, to release all the pent-up agony, but not a single sound would come out. The words barren and useless hit me like twin sledgehammers, smashing every ounce of pride and sacrifice I'd carefully built over the years. I'm Lauren, 35 years old, CEO of a fashion design company that's made a real name for itself in the industry. 7 years ago, I married Tyler when we were both just low-level employees scraping by on entry-level salaries. Back then, Tyler was gentle, hard-working, always promising to spend the rest of his life making me happy. Believing those sweet words, I sold the inheritance land my parents had given me as a wedding gift to fund our business, determined to change our destiny. I threw myself into work like a woman possessed sleepless nights designing collections, business trips that lasted weeks, client dinners where I drank until I was sick, vomiting bile. I starved myself, went without, saved every penny to grow the company. When business started taking off, I brought Tyler on board, promoted him to VP of sales so he could hold his head high, so he wouldn't have to grovel working for someone else. I dressed him in designer suits, bought him expensive watches, and leased him a luxury car for client meetings. I built his family a stunning riverfront mansion and brought Patricia up from their small town so she could live like royalty. I thought my devotion and sacrifice would earn me a complete, loving family, but no, God seemed determined to mock me. For 7 years, despite trying everything, my belly remained flat. My journey to have a child was a trail of tears and unimaginable pain. I went through 5 rounds of IVF, those hormone injections that felt like ice piercing through to my bones. The egg retrievals so painful I'd pass out on the cold operating table. My belly was a canvas of purple bruises, crisscrossed with needle marks, hard as stone. Every time the doctor told me the embryos hadn't developed, my heart shattered all over again. But all that physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation of facing my mother-in-law. Patricia, a woman who'd lived a hard rural life, quickly learned to play the lady of the manor once I dressed her in silk and designer clothes. She never stopped tormenting me. Her words were poison. Other families bring daughters-in-law home to have children, to continue the family line. This family was unlucky enough to get stuck with a barren woman. A toxic tree bears no fruit. Every family dinner was pure torture. She'd pick the best piece of meat and put it in her son's bowl, then drop a casual remark. A woman who can't have kids might as well raise chickens, at least hens lay eggs. What's the point of having money if there's no one to light incense when you're dead? In those moments, Tyler always played the perfect husband. He'd squeeze my hand, eyes glistening with fake sympathy, defending me in front of his mother. Mom, don't say that. It upsets her. Children are a gift from God. Having them a little later is fine. As long as we love each other, that's enough for me. I'd been stupid enough to believe that perfect act. I'd cried tears of gratitude, telling myself I had to work even harder to make up for my husband's sacrifice. Turns out, I was just a pathetic puppet dancing in the hands of liars. Tears streamed down my face, soaking my blouse. I slumped over the steering wheel, sobbing uncontrollably. Tears of rage, of 7 years of youth trampled underfoot, of love turned into a punchline for the world. I asked myself what I'd done wrong. I'd provided for his family without missing a single thing. I gave Patricia an allowance of $4,000 a month, plus a credit card with no limit. His lazy, party-loving sister Nicole, I'd even gotten her a cushy, high-paying job at the company and bought her designer dresses so she could show off. I'd fulfilled every duty of a daughter-in-law. I'd poured out my entire heart as a wife. Why were they so cruel to me? But then, after the storm of rage and grief passed, a strange calm settled over me. A silence so terrifying it made my skin prickle. I lifted my head and stared at my haggard reflection in the rearview mirror. Eyes red and swollen, still wet with tears, but deep inside, a cold fire had begun to burn. Weakness and self-pity gave way to a brutal clarity. I swiped my hand across my face, wiping away the tears. These would be the last tears I'd ever shed for this rotten family. I didn't rush home to cause a scene. Didn't scream or claw at anyone like some hysterical woman. That would only satisfy momentary anger while putting me at a disadvantage. I was a CEO. I held the livelihoods of hundreds of employees in my hands. I had to handle this mess like an educated, strong woman with her pride intact. They treated me like a gold mine to plunder. Fine, I'd show them what it felt like to plummet from the heights of glory into the deepest abyss. First, I recalled the entire fertility treatment process. Tyler had always been the one to hold our medical files, always the one to deliver test results. The fertility specialist we'd been seeing was his old college buddy. A spark of suspicion ignited in my mind. I picked up my phone and called a leading reproductive endocrinologist I'd met at a charity gala, asking him to check our medical records in the national database. 30 minutes later, his return call delivered the final blow, killing whatever remained of my marital devotion. Lauren, I've checked everything thoroughly. According to the original lab results, your ovaries and uterus are perfectly normal, excellent, in fact. The infertility is on your husband's side. His sperm count is essentially zero, and there are signs of a chronic sexually transmitted infection from years of reckless behavior. His chances of fathering a child naturally are exactly zero. The records you have at home were definitely falsified. I squeezed my eyes shut, a chill running down my spine. The one who couldn't have children, the one who was infertile, was him. And for 7 years, he'd blamed everything on me. He'd let me endure hundreds of chemical injections, agonizing procedures, his mother's verbal abuse. He'd used my suffering to cover up his own degenerate lifestyle. And now he'd brought home some pregnant woman, mocking me as Barren. That baby in his mistress's belly was obviously the result of some random hookup. And Tyler, so desperate for a child to steal my assets, had happily agreed to raise another man's baby without knowing the truth. What a brilliant performance. A tragicomedy of the bitterest kind. I smirked. A cold, razor-sharp smile. If they wanted to act, I'd give them the grandest stage to perform on until the very last scene. I dialed Marcus next, a seasoned private investigator who'd helped me deal with dirty corporate competition before. Marcus, I need you to look into someone named Tyler VP of Sales at Vanfu Designs. He's also my husband. I need to know his schedule, all bank transactions, any romantic relationships outside our marriage, and especially information about a pregnant woman who's been seen with him frequently. I need hard evidence. Photos, videos, the works within 3 days. Money is no object. Next, I called Karen, the company's CFO, a woman I trusted absolutely, who'd been by my side since the hardest early days. Karen, I need you to stay late tonight for something confidential. Go through all the books, receipts, invoices, supply contracts, client entertainment expenses, investment projects from the last 3 years that Tyler personally approved. I suspect he's set up shell companies and used fake contracts to siphon money from the company. Gather all the original documents and prepare a detailed audit report for me. Absolutely no one can know about this, not even the VP. Once that was done, I leaned back in my seat and slowly steadied my breathing. I opened my compact, touched up the dark circles under my eyes, and applied a bold red lipstick that radiated authority. I wouldn't let anyone see me looking pathetic. 7 years of my youth had been thrown to the dogs, but I still had a massive fortune, my company, my intelligence, and the pride of a successful woman. This betrayal wouldn't destroy me. It would be the catalyst for a complete purge. 6 in the evening, my car rolled slowly into the wide driveway of the riverfront mansion, a stark contrast to the ice in my heart. The house was ablaze with warm light, filled with laughter and chatter. I stepped inside. The aroma of expensive bird's nest soup wafted from the kitchen. Patricia was bustling around, directing the housekeeper to set the table. When she saw me walk in, she froze for a split second, a flash of panic in her eyes, before quickly covering it with her usual fake smile. The woman who'd been fawning over her son's mistress just hours ago now rushed to greet her daughter-in-law with open arms. "Oh, there's my precious daughter-in-law. Was work exhausting today, dear? I had the cook prepare special bird's nest soup to build up your strength. You've been looking so thin lately, it breaks my heart." Her voice was honey-sweet, the fake concern so thick it made me nauseous. Tyler came downstairs in his expensive silk pajamas. He hurried over, slipped an arm around my shoulders, and planted a kiss on my forehead. "My beautiful wife is home. I missed you so much. Was it a busy day at the office? Why didn't you call me to help? You're working yourself to the bone, baby. It hurts me to see you like this." If this had been the Lauren of yesterday, I might have melted into his arms, might have cried tears of gratitude for my mother-in-law's thoughtfulness. But now I only felt absolute revulsion. I forced a smile, gently pushed Tyler's hand away, and rubbed my temples. "It was a crazy day at work. I have a bit of a headache. You and Mom go ahead and eat. I'm going to shower and lie down for a bit. The share transfer will probably have to wait until next week. I need to review the books first." At the words share transfer, Tyler's eyes lit up. He quickly agreed. Of course work is important, but your health is more important. Go rest. I'll have the staff bring soup up to your room. Don't worry about the shares, I can handle it. You don't need to stress about it." I turned and walked up the stairs, the corner of my lip curling into a cold smile. "Keep acting. Go ahead and play your parts, the good husband, the loving mother-in-law, because this play is about to close. You have no idea that standing before you right now isn't your obedient, meek daughter-in-law anymore, but a wild animal coiled in terrifying silence, preparing to strike with lethal precision. Enjoy these last peaceful moments in this luxury mansion, because tomorrow your worst nightmare truly begins." The next morning, I woke as the first rays of sunlight crept through the curtain gaps. Tyler was still sleeping soundly beside me, his snoring filling the quiet room. Looking at the fake face of the man I'd shared my bed with for 7 years, I felt no more pain or tears. My heart had turned to ice cold and hard as steel. I carefully slipped out from under the covers without making a sound. In the bathroom, I turned the faucet to freezing and let the cold water wash away any remnants of last night's weakness. Standing before the mirror, I applied the sharpest, most precise makeup I'd ever worn. My eyes no longer held the look of endurance or sacrifice. Instead, they blazed with the determination of a woman ready to reclaim everything that belonged to her. I put on a wine-red power suit, the color of authority and retribution. My black stilettos clicked against the hardwood floor with each step, heralding the storm about to sweep through this ungrateful family. At the office, I walked into the CEO's suite and felt like a general seated in the most impenetrable fortress. I'd built this place from nothing, Every brick, every contract was soaked in my sweat and tears. And those people had dared to dream of stealing it to build their own little nest. Pathetic. The first thing I did was call the branch manager at the bank where I held my premium accounts. He answered immediately with utmost deference. "Good morning, Lauren. What can I do for you?" "Cut all supplementary credit cards under Tyler Mitchell, Patricia Mitchell, and Nicole Mitchell. Effective immediately. No advance notice. Cancel all automatic monthly transfers from my personal accounts to theirs. Starting now." The bank manager was surprised, but with a VIP client who kept tens of millions in his institution, he didn't dare question a single word. He immediately confirmed and processed the request. 5 minutes later, a notification confirmed all transactions had been successfully frozen. I allowed myself a slight smile and took a sip of bitter black coffee. The sweet milk that parasitic family had been sucking dry for years had officially been cut off. Let's see how they'd survive without the dirty money from this fake Barren woman. I leaned back, thinking about the astronomical sums I'd thrown out the window. Every month, I'd faithfully transferred $4,000 to Patricia as spending money. That didn't include the time she'd blown money, gambling, and called crying, at which point I'd wire another couple thousand to cover her debts. My sister-in-law Nicole had a credit card with an $8,000 limit to buy designer clothes, hit the spa, travel, and post Instagram photos like some trust fund princess. And Tyler, on top of his VP salary of over $10,000 a month, I'd put numerous assets in his name and given him my black card for client entertainment. They'd grown accustomed to living like royalty, spending money without looking at price tags, treating my money like confetti, a bunch of blood-sucking parasites who never blinked. Meanwhile, at the riverfront mansion, Patricia had just woken up. She stretched on her plush memory foam mattress, ordering the housekeeper to bring fresh orange juice to her room. She was in an exceptionally good mood today. The grandchild she'd been longing for was growing steadily in the belly of her future daughter-in-law. She opened her massive walk-in closet and selected the most expensive silk dress I'd bought her the month before, added a gleaming pearl necklace around her neck, applied heavy makeup and spritzed on strong perfume, looking every bit the wealthy, powerful matriarch. She grabbed her newest phone and dialed her son's pregnant mistress. "Tiffany, dear, get dressed and ready. I'm coming to pick you up. We're going to the luxury mall today. I'm buying you a real diamond jewelry set as a gift for my grandchild. Pick whatever you want, the most expensive, the most beautiful. Money is no object with me." Patricia had the family chauffeur drive her to the upscale apartment Tyler was renting for his mistress. The two women, one old, one young, linked arms, and strolled into the city's most exclusive shopping center. Tiffany was 5 months pregnant, but still wore tight, revealing clothes, her face caked with makeup, looking thoroughly pleased with herself. She constantly flattered Patricia, telling her how young and elegant she looked, making Patricia beam with pride, her nose swelling like a tomato. They walked into a high-end European diamond boutique. Patricia strode in with her chin held high, waving dismissively at the sales associate at the door. "Show me your newest collections, the most expensive pieces you have. Don't bother bringing out anything cheap. Nothing under $10,000 is fit for my beloved daughter-in-law." The sales associate's eyes lit up at the big spending client. She bowed and quickly led them to the VIP display area. Patricia and Tiffany settled into plush red velvet chairs, demanding the associate bring out piece after piece for them to try. Tiffany pointed at an exquisite diamond necklace. The center stone was the size of a small pea, blazing with light. "Mom, I love this one. It would go perfectly with the dress I'm wearing to the gala. But the price is so steep, $14,000? She feigned a pout, glancing at Patricia with eager expectation. Patricia waved her hand and laughed loudly, her voice echoing across the store, making other customers turn to look. "Oh, please, 14,000? I'd pay 50,000 for you. My grandchild is priceless. Take it and add that $8,000 ring too. Make it a set. Wrap everything up and ring it through." The sales associate beamed, quickly preparing an invoice totaling $22,000. Patricia proudly opened her designer handbag and pulled out the powerful credit card I'd issued in her name. She pinched it between 2 fingers and slid it toward the cashier, with the air of a queen bestowing a royal gift. The cashier took the card with a smile and swiped it. Beep beep. The screen flashed red. Transaction declined. The associate hesitated, then said politely, "I'm sorry, ma'am. The machine is showing an error. It might be a network issue. Let me try again." The second time, the same beep sounded. Transaction declined again. Now the smile on the associate's face was freezing over. "Ma'am, your card appears to be locked, or over its spending limit. Do you have another card or cash?" Patricia's face went rigid. She glared, snapping, "What nonsense are you talking about? This is a premium card with an unlimited limit. How could it possibly be locked? Your card reader must be broken. Bring out a different machine right now." The cashier awkwardly switched to another terminal, but the result was identical. Transaction declined. The atmosphere in the store was growing suffocating. Tiffany stood beside her, her face turning grey. She nudged Patricia. "Check your card again. Maybe there's some mistake?" People are staring. This is humiliating. Patricia fumbled through her purse and pulled out a different card, Tyler's, which he'd given her for expenses. "Here, swipe this one." But heaven has a sense of humor. The second card was immediately spat out with the same error. Card locked by primary cardholder. By now, the staff's attitude had changed completely. The deferential bows were gone, replaced by suspicious, mocking glances and whispered comments. Coming into a diamond store trying to buy $20,000 worth of jewelry with locked cards, probably found someone's card and tried to use it. An employee said loudly enough for Patricia to hear. Blood rushed to Patricia's face, turning it red as a rooster's comb. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed my number. On my end, I was leisurely reviewing the audit report. Seeing my mother-in-law's name flash on the screen, I allowed myself a smile of absolute satisfaction. I didn't decline the call. I didn't answer it either. I just let the phone vibrate against the wooden desk, silently enjoying the ringing as a symphony of retribution. "Call me. Go ahead, call me, you greedy old woman. Today you're going to learn what it feels like to be abandoned and humiliated in public." Inside the jewelry store, Patricia was on her fifth attempt, and still nothing but endless ringing on the other end. Panic began to rise in the eyes of the woman who'd learned to play the lady. Tiffany was openly annoyed. She dropped the diamond necklace onto the glass counter with a sneer. "You said you'd cover everything, so why can't the card go through? I'm not standing here to be made a fool of." With that, the mistress gathered her dress and walked straight out, leaving Patricia standing alone in the store. The store manager approached polite but ice cold. "Ma'am, if you cannot pay, please return the merchandise so we can assist other customers. We're very busy and don't have time for window shoppers." Patricia was choking with rage but couldn't argue. She shoved the useless cards back into her bag, ducked her head, and scurried out. Through the giggles and contemptuous stares of the staff, the once proud matriarch was reduced to nothing more than a plucked chicken thrown out into the street. But my punishment didn't stop there. At the exact same moment, Patricia was being humiliated at the jewelry store. At the most exclusive luxury spa in the city, my dear sister-in-law Nicole was experiencing her own nightmare. Nicole had just finished a gold leaf facial and body treatment costing about $2,000. She sauntered up to the reception desk in her silk robe like an A-list celebrity, tossed her credit card onto the marble counter, and snapped, "Ring me up for today's package, and add 10 boxes of your premium pearl cream to go." Her total came to nearly $4,000. The receptionist processed the transaction, and naturally, the inevitable happened. A piercing beep sounded, the card was declined, locked. Nicole scowled. "What kind of operation are you running here? My card is VIP, how can it possibly not work?" "Swipe it again. I have afternoon tea plans." After 5 failed attempts, the spa manager herself came out. She looked at Nicole with sharp eyes. "Nicole, your card genuinely cannot be used anymore. Your total is $4,000. You'll need to transfer funds or pay cash. Otherwise, we'll have to involve the authorities for using services without the ability to pay." Nicole's face went white as a sheet. She didn't have $4,000 in her personal account. Her salary from the company, she'd blown it all at bars since the beginning of the month. Terrified, she called Patricia. "Mom, save me. My card's been locked. The spa people are holding me here, threatening to call the cops. Bring money." On the other end, Patricia was in no position to help. She was still reeling from her own humiliation at the mall. She shrieked, "Money? Where am I supposed to get money? My cards are locked too. I've been calling Lauren and she won't pick up. Call Tyler, tell him to bring money and sort this out." Nicole frantically dialed her brother. At that moment, Tyler was sitting comfortably in his VP office at my company, scrolling through his phone looking at new car models, planning to buy one to impress his mistress. Seeing his sister's name flash on the screen with a crying voice, he answered in annoyance. "What's with all the screaming? I'll transfer you the money. It's just a few $1,000s, no need to make a federal case out of it." Confidently, Tyler opened his banking app and entered the SPA's account details to transfer funds. But when he hit confirm, the app showed an error. Source account frozen. He jolted, tried the credit card instead, same result. He opened other bank apps. All locked, no transactions possible. Now Tyler truly felt something was wrong. A cold chill ran down his spine. He bolted from his office, ready to storm up to the CEO's suite and demand answers from me. But he didn't know that on the top floor of the building, I was sitting comfortably in my chair of power, silently reviewing reports from the private investigator, Marcus, and CFO Karen. The evidence of Tyler's crimes was stacked in a thick folder, sharp as blades cutting through steel. The financial lifeline of that entire parasitic family had been severed by my own hand without a shred of mercy. They were thrashing in total panic, tearing at each other like rats driven into a dead end. But this was only the soft opening, the appetizer for a feast of retribution. The humiliation of being broke was just a tiny fraction of the tragedy they were about to endure. I smirked coldly, tapping my fingers on the glass desktop. The real storm would hit this afternoon, right here in this building, stripping away every ounce of fake glory that treacherous man had wrapped himself in. Right on time, the afternoon sky darkened with swirling storm clouds, heralding a tempest about to break. The air outside was oppressive and suffocating, but inside the boardroom of the company's executive suite, it was cold and tense beyond measure. I sat in the chairman's seat, the most powerful black leather chair in the room. Before me stretched the long oak table where the most brutal judgment I'd ever prepared was about to be carried out. Today I wore a deep red power suit, my hair pulled up in a sleek chignon, my lips painted in a shade of authority. The weakness of the wife was completely dead, replaced by a CEO radiating lethal intent, ready to strip away the false moral mask of a faithless man. The senior audit team and CFO Karen were present, seated in a row with thick files in hand. Everyone maintained absolute silence, expressions grave, no one daring to whisper or exchange glances, because they all knew the evidence in those folders was enough to send a senior executive to prison. I checked the clock. As the minute hand clicked to 12, the heavy mahogany boardroom doors slowly opened. Tyler walked in with supreme confidence and arrogance. He wore the Navy designer suit I'd just bought him last month, the Swiss watch worth tens of thousands of dollars on his wrist, his hair slicked back with gel, that familiar half smile playing on his lips. The smile that had captivated me for 7 years but now made me sick to my stomach. He assumed today was the greatest day of his life. He was certain this emergency board meeting had been called, so I could officially announce the transfer of 30% of my company shares to him, transforming him from a salaried employee into the true owner of the company. He casually pulled out the chair at the vice chairman's position to my right, sat down, and crossed his legs with a smug expression. He glanced around the room, noted the audit team's presence, and frowned slightly but quickly regained his composure. In his shallow mind, he probably thought the audit was just a standard legal formality before a major asset transfer. He leaned forward and spoke in a booming voice, putting on a show of leadership. "Good afternoon, everyone. The CEO called this emergency meeting, so I assume there's big news to share with the entire leadership team. I'm certainly looking forward to the company's next steps." He turned to me with an affectionate, fake smile. I didn't return that smile. My face was as cold as an ice sculpture. I tapped my pen lightly on the glass table, the dry sound signaling the official start of the meeting. The entire room fell into a silence so sharp you could only hear the climate control pumping out freezing air. I've called all key executives here today not to discuss growth plans or share transfers, as our VP of Sales seems to believe. This meeting is to clean house, to rip out the thorns that have been draining this company's assets. My voice was steady, each word clear and cutting, slicing through the air like a blade. Tyler's smile froze. He looked around, seeming to sense an invisible crosshair targeting him. He cleared his throat, trying to salvage some authority. What do you mean by that, CEO? The company is performing excellently. Last quarter's revenue was a record high. The team has been working tirelessly. Why are we suddenly talking about asset draining? I didn't bother answering him. Instead, I nodded to CFO Karen. Karen opened the red folder in her hands with a stern expression and began reading, methodically, every number, every contract. Members of the board, per the CEO's directive, the internal audit team has conducted a comprehensive review of all financial records for the past 3 years. We have discovered a series of severe irregularities in the sales department, directly managed by VP Tyler. Specifically, there are 5 supply contracts for major projects that are entirely fictitious. The so-called partner companies that signed these contracts are, in fact, shell companies set up by Tyler using relatives as figureheads. No materials were ever delivered to our warehouses, yet company funds were regularly dispersed into these companies' accounts. Every word from Karen was like a thunderclap in Tyler's ears. His face shifted from smug to ashen. Beads of sweat formed on his slick forehead. He slammed his hand on the table and stood up, his voice suddenly shrill and trembling. Karen, you're making baseless accusations. You've been CFO for years, all the books and receipts went through your review. How can you suddenly pin everything on me? Those contracts were confirmed by the project management team. Materials were delivered straight to the job sites, not through the central warehouse. CEO, don't listen to troublemakers. Someone's trying to drive a wedge between us, trying to push me out of the company. He was still fighting, using our cheap marital bond as a shield for his filth. I smiled a smile of absolute contempt. I picked up a file provided by private investigator Marcus and threw it hard onto the table in front of Tyler. The file slid across the glass, scattering color photographs. Look at these. Look closely at these shell companies you claim are delivering to job sites. Their registered addresses are empty lots in the outskirts. The legal representative is your cousin from back home, a man who's been unemployed for years, signing contracts worth millions of dollars with our company. Did you really think you could fool me so easily? Tyler's hands shook as he picked up the photos. His eyes bulged, his lips moving soundlessly. He knew he'd fallen into an inescapable trap. The evidence was too clear, too detailed, impossible to deny. But I wasn't done. The pain he'd caused me over 7 years couldn't be repaid with just a few fake contracts. I pressed the control button in my hand, and the large projection screen at the end of the room lit up with an extremely detailed cash flow diagram. Ladies and gentlemen, the total amount embezzled through these shell contracts is approximately $120,000. And would you like to know where our company's hard-earned money went? Karen, please explain this chart. Karen stood, using a laser pointer to trace the flow lines on the screen. The $120,000, after being transferred to the shell companies, was withdrawn in cash and deposited directly into a personal account under the name Tiffany Chen. Based on this bank statement, we can clearly see that upon receiving the funds, the account holder immediately made a down payment on a luxury condo in the upscale district. The moment Tiffany Chen's name was spoken, Tyler seemed to have his life drained away. He collapsed into his leather chair, his entire body shaking. He gasped for air, staring at me with terrified eyes as if looking at a demon. He couldn't believe I not only knew about the embezzlement, but had uncovered every detail of his scheme to fund his mistress with my money. I rose from the chairman's seat. I took slow, authoritative steps toward Tyler. My heels struck the floor in a rhythm that made the room feel suffocating. I stopped right beside him, leaned down with both hands on the table, my eyes sharp as scalpels locking onto his terrified gaze. Tiffany Chen, the little pregnant mistress you and your mother have been pampering with $600 bird's nest soup and $20,000 diamond jewelry. You lied to me, blamed me for being barren and useless, then stole my company's money to buy a home and a car for that loose woman. Did you think your despicable acts could stay hidden from the world? The boardroom fell into horrified silence. The board members and department heads stared at Tyler. their expressions shifting from shock to absolute contempt. No one dared speak because they were witnessing a brutal unmasking of the CEO they'd always respected. A wife who'd loved blindly was now personally stripping away the moral mask of her betrayer before hundreds of witnesses. Tyler shattered completely. His wall of pride and arrogance collapsed to dust. He shoved his chair back and dropped to his knees at my feet, grabbing my calves, tears and snot streaming down his face, which had lost all humanity. "Lauren, please, I'm begging you. I know I was wrong. That vixen tricked me. She bewitched me. That's the only reason I did such terrible things. For the sake of our 7 years of marriage, for my elderly mother, please. Just this once. I promise I'll sell that apartment and return the money to the company. I'll cut ties with Tiffany completely. Don't fire me. Don't call the police. If I go to prison, my life is over." He wailed pathetically, the begging words spilling from the same mouth that had once called me a useless, barren woman. I stood up straight and coldly pulled my leg from his filthy grip. I looked down at him without a shred of pity, only disgust and contempt. "You dare mention our sacred 7-year bond? For 7 years, I endured hundreds of painful injections, your mother's abuse, all because you were infertile but falsified medical records to blame me. You ruthlessly stole my chance to be a mother, made me a laughingstock. A cold-blooded man like you has no right to beg for forgiveness." The entire room gasped. The revelation that Tyler was infertile and had deceived his wife shattered whatever dignity he had left. Whispers and scornful comments rippled from every corner of the room. Tyler buried his face against the hardwood floor, clawing at his slick hair, emitting guttural sounds like a wounded animal driven into a corner. He knew that today, in this room, the name Tyler Mitchell had been permanently buried in the business world. I returned to the chairman's seat, stood tall, and declared before the entire leadership team, "As CEO and majority shareholder of this company, I am officially terminating Tyler Mitchell from his position as VP of Sales, stripping him of all authority and representation rights effective immediately. HR will issue the termination notice and notify all branches, partners, and clients to prevent Tyler from using the company name for further fraud. Second, I'm giving Tyler exactly 3 days to return the full $120,000 he embezzled. If the funds are not returned to the company account within that deadline, Karen will deliver the complete evidence file to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution on charges of embezzlement and fraud." The sentence had been pronounced. My words were like hammer blows nailing shut the coffin of Tyler's career. He lay flat on the floor, no strength left to scream or beg another word. His cowardice showed in every cell of his being. I looked toward the boardroom doors where 2 large security guards stood waiting. I jerked my chin in a brief command. "Escort Tyler Mitchell from the building. Confiscate his employee badge, keycard, company car keys, and seal off everything in his office. From today forward, anyone who lets him through these doors will be terminated immediately." The 2 guards stepped forward, hauled Tyler to his feet. He was limp as a noodle, stumbling along, not daring to look up at anyone. As he was dragged from the boardroom and down the corridor, hundreds of employees stood clustered outside, pointing and whispering. The eyes that had once admired and respected the dashing VP now held only contempt and pity. They laughed and jeered at a man who'd lived off his wife while cheating on her, embezzling funds before finally being unmasked and thrown out like garbage. For a man who cared about appearances as much as Tyler, this humiliation was probably worse than death. When Tyler's silhouette disappeared behind the elevator doors, I turned back to the board. The atmosphere remained tense. Everyone waited for my next directive. I took a deep breath, reclaiming my composure as a leader. My personal matter has been resolved. Thank you all for your cooperation. The company will continue normal operations. I'll oversee the sales division directly until we find someone more deserving. Everyone, please return to work. The board members and department heads rose, bowed, and quickly filed out. Only I remained standing in the vast space. The storm had swept through the company, clearing out the most rotten debris. I looked down at my hands, the hands that had once calloused from hard work to support my husband, now the hands that had personally overturned the rice bowl of a faithless man. I felt no pain, no regret. Cold-blooded, heartless, let the world judge me however they want. I only knew that, once driven to the edge, a woman is fully capable of becoming a fire phoenix, burning to ashes anyone who dares trample on her dignity. But this was still not the end. There remained $1 million mansion being tainted by the presence of an ungrateful mother-in-law and a scheming mistress. I pulled out my phone and dialed my personal attorney. Jonathan, have all the legal documents proving premarital assets ready. This afternoon, you and the security team are coming with me to the riverfront mansion. It's time for a thorough purge, sweeping every piece of trash out of my home. 4 in the afternoon. The midday storm had passed, replaced by the brutal heat of a midsummer sun. The heat radiating from the asphalt was stifling, but sitting in my ultra-luxury vehicle, I felt only absolute cool and tranquility. The car glided smoothly down the tree-lined streets of the upscale riverfront neighborhood. Beside me sat Jonathan, a brilliant attorney with a face as cold as iron. In the front seat rode 2 massive security guards, muscles bulging through their professional black suits. My heart no longer raced with the pain or fury of betrayal. It beat with the steady rhythm of justice, of liberation. For 7 years, every time I came home and saw the ornate wrought iron gates of this mansion, I'd felt an invisible weight pressing on my shoulders. There, I had to play the role of the obedient daughter-in-law, the forgiving wife, breaking my back to serve the endless demands of my husband's family. But today, I was returning not to serve, but to reclaim my kingdom. The gates opened automatically, and the car rolled into the wide, marble-paved driveway. Through the transparent glass of the living room windows, I could see a scene that was both cozy and utterly absurd. Patricia and his mistress Tiffany were lounging on the imported Italian leather sofa. Around them sat plates of expensive imported fruit, giant grapes the size of thumbs, Japanese melons worth a fortune. They were snacking and swinging their legs, watching some reality show on the massive curved TV. Not a trace of worry or panic on either of their faces despite that morning's humiliation at the mall with the locked credit cards. Surely in Patricia's narrow thinking, she still believed the card issue was a technical glitch, or at worst, a momentary fit of pique from me. She trusted absolutely in the backing of her darling son, the VP. She believed the baby in Tiffany's belly was a priceless bargaining chip that could keep me in line. I took a deep breath, pushed open the car door, and stepped out. Jonathan and the 2 security guards followed, forming an imposing formation, radiating lethal intent as we entered the house. Hearing footsteps, Patricia turned lazily. When she saw me, her face immediately twisted into that familiar, vicious expression. She tossed her grapes onto the plate, planted her hands on her hips, and began spitting poison. Oh, look who decided to show her face. What kind of game are you playing? Locking my cards and Nicole's? Do you have any idea how humiliated I was at the jewelry store today? You're a CEO behaving like a petty child. Unlock my cards this instant and withdraw $20,000 so I can buy Tiffany another jewelry set as compensation. Don't make me call Tyler home to teach you a lesson. Beside her, Tiffany stroked her swollen belly and looked at me down her nose. She played the role of the oppressed little lady, her tone mocking and vicious. You have so much money you can't take it to the grave. Why not take care of the woman carrying the bloodline of the Mitchell family? When you die, there won't be anyone to light a candle for you anyway. You useless, barren woman. I listened to every insult in silence, my eyes betraying not a flicker of emotion. My silence made the atmosphere in the living room suddenly oppressive and strange. Patricia and Tiffany began to sense something was wrong. They glanced at the 2 large security guards standing with arms crossed, blocking the doorway, then at the attorney slowly opening his black briefcase. Mother is right. Money can't go to the grave with you, I said, my voice flat, breaking the silence. But money can be used to kick parasitic freeloaders out of your life. And I will use every penny of my hard-earned money to teach you a lesson about karma. I walked to the coffee table and swept the imported fruit onto the floor. The expensive grapes scattered under my stiletto heels with a crash. Patricia jumped. Are you crazy? Are you going to trash the house? Who are these thugs? You hired goons to intimidate your own mother-in-law? I didn't bother arguing. I nodded to Attorney Jonathan. Jonathan stepped forward, withdrew a set of documents stamped with official government seals, and placed them firmly on the glass table. Mrs. Patricia Mitchell and Miss Tiffany Chen. I am the legal representative for Miss Lauren. These are the property deeds and land records for this residence. As you can clearly see, this mansion was purchased and titled solely in Miss Lauren's name 2 years before she married Mr. Tyler. Under state marital property law, this is separate premarital property, 100% owned by Miss Lauren. Jonathan adjusted his glasses, his gaze sharp, as he looked at the two faces draining of color. That means legally, Mr. Tyler has absolutely no ownership interest in this house, and you two are merely house guests. The homeowner no longer consents to your presence. I am requesting that you immediately gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises. Patricia looked like she'd been struck by lightning. She stammered, her face bloodless, pointing at the deed. What? Premarital property? That's impossible. Tyler told me he had a share in this house. He's your husband. What's yours is his. Don't try to fool me. I'm not going anywhere. This is my son's house. She launched into her familiar tantrum, throwing herself onto the marble floor, pounding her fists and wailing. Neighbors, come see a daughter-in-law throwing her mother-in-law into the street. God in heaven, I raised my son only to have his wife walk all over me. Tyler, come home and see what your wife is doing to your mother. Tiffany was no less panicked. Her dream of marrying into this riverfront mansion as its lady was evaporating into smoke. She clutched her belly, pointed at me, and shrieked, "Don't go too far. I'm carrying Tyler's blood, the flesh and blood of this family. You dare throw us out into the street? When Tyler comes home, he won't let you get away with this. He's the VP, he'll strip you of everything." I laughed. A laugh that echoed through the vast room, laced with bitterness and absolute contempt. I slowly sat down on the single sofa opposite them, crossed my legs with authority. Tyler's bloodline? The Mitchell family's flesh and blood? I stared straight into Tiffany's eyes, catching the flash of terror in her pupils. Would you like to know a very interesting truth? Tyler, your wonderful lover, is completely infertile. His sperm was destroyed years ago by his reckless lifestyle and disease. His chances of fathering a child are exactly zero. So whose baby are you really carrying? You tricked Tyler into raising another man's child, and Tyler stole my money to fund your little scheme. What a sickening performance. Tiffany stood frozen, eyes bulging, her red-painted lips trembling. She stumbled backward and collapsed onto the sofa. Her greatest secret had been laid bare. She knew the baby wasn't Tyler's, she thought she'd hidden it well. Now, hearing me expose the truth, she understood she had no cards left to play. Patricia's wailing stopped abruptly. She scrambled up, staring at me, then at Tiffany's belly. The cruel truth struck down the mind of a backward woman who desperately wanted a grandchild to continue the line. What are you saying? Tyler is infertile? The baby is fake? He's raising another man's child? No, that can't be. I didn't give them time to process the shock. I stood up and delivered the final verdict in a voice of iron. That's not all. Your beloved son, the mighty VP you were so proud of, was fired and thrown out of the company an hour ago. He colluded with shell companies to embezzle over $100,000 to buy a home for this woman. I've given him 3 days to repay the money, or he'll be indicted. Bank accounts frozen, titles stripped, debt piling up, and criminal charges coming. Do you really think he can protect you now? Patricia's entire world collapsed. Her face crumpled like wet paper. She stopped screaming, just clutched her chest, gasping. Tears and snot flowed freely in absolute despair. The son she'd worshipped was a criminal headed for prison. The grandchild she'd prized was the illegitimate spawn of a promiscuous woman, and the glamorous facade she'd been wearing was about to be stripped away completely. Jonathan read them their deadline. Per standard legal procedure and the agreement we've prepared, you have exactly 3 hours to pack your personal belongings. After 3 hours, if you haven't vacated voluntarily, we will request local law enforcement to intervene for criminal trespassing. The clock starts now. Jonathan coldly pressed the button on his stopwatch. Patricia and Tiffany snapped out of their nightmare. They knew I wasn't joking, and they had no other options. Patricia staggered to her feet, face streaked with tears, and shuffled upstairs to pack. Tiffany clutched her belly and stumbled after, her face bloodless. The 3 hours were chaotic and noisy. The sound of zippers, things being thrown around, echoed from the upstairs rooms. I sat in the living room, sipping cold water, silently watching everything unfold on the internal security cameras. My security guards had orders to monitor every move, ensuring nothing of value belonging to me was smuggled out. When the deadline expired, Patricia and Tiffany struggled down the stairs with bulging suitcases. Just then, Nicole arrived by taxi after being kicked out of the spa for non-payment. Seeing her mother and her brother's mistress standing ragged before the security team with bags in hand, Nicole stood bewildered, not understanding what was happening. But when Patricia tearfully recounted everything, Nicole collapsed, completely sobbing and begging my forgiveness. I remained absolutely unmoved. "Stop," I spoke as they were about to walk out the door. I stepped forward, scanning their suitcases and the items they carried, open every bag for inspection. Patricia went pale, clutching her bright red suitcase. "What are you going to do? These are my clothes. You're going to rob an old woman of her clothes?" A tall security guard stepped forward, gently but firmly pushed Patricia's hands aside and unzipped the suitcase. Inside, along with a few silk dresses, were stuffed designer handbags, Hermes, Chanel jewelry boxes, expensive watches, and even jade figurines I displayed in my bedroom. I sneered, shaking my head in disbelief. Even at rock bottom, their greedy, thieving nature hadn't changed one bit. "Take everything out. Return it all," I ordered coldly. Every one of these handbags, every piece of jewelry, was purchased with my money. I still have the receipts. Mother is right. These are her clothes. But she forgot who paid for those luxury items, her daughter-in-law. Now I'm taking them back. You're only allowed to leave with the cheap clothes you brought from your small town 7 years ago, or items you personally purchased with your own money. Absolutely nothing of mine leaves this house. The guards quickly pulled out every designer item, tossing them aside. Patricia howled, rolling on the floor, clutching at handbags uselessly. Nicole was forced to surrender the designer bag on her shoulder and remove the diamond jewelry from her neck. Then came Tiffany, the scheming mistress. She tried to slip quietly through the door, but the guards blocked her path. They removed the Rolex from her wrist, the pearl earrings from her ears. Those were bought with my money by Tyler. "Return them all," I growled, my eyes burning into her. Tiffany tremblingly removed every piece of expensive jewelry, dropping them into the tray the guard held out. Her face twisted with resentment and humiliation. Finally, stripped of every valuable item, the three women, with a few plastic bags of wrinkled old clothes, shuffled out through the ornate wrought-iron gates of the riverfront mansion. The brutal afternoon sun beat down on their haggard faces. Outside, wealthy neighbors walking dogs or jogging had gathered to watch. They whispered and pointed at the spectacle of the Mitchell family matriarch being thrown into the street in such pathetic fashion. No more luxury cars chauffeuring them around, no more silk dresses and sparkling jewelry. They were now empty-handed, bearing the stains of betrayal and greed. I leaned against the iron gate, watching their retreating silhouettes in the sweltering afternoon heat. The million-dollar mansion behind me had truly changed owners, cleansed of all the filth and poison. A strange peace crept into my mind. I knew the storms of life awaited them out there, but that was the karma they had to bear themselves. No one could carry that burden for them. Leaving the upscale riverfront neighborhood, as the sun dipped westward, 4 people carrying plastic bags of meager belongings trudged through the heat radiating off the asphalt. No money for a decent taxi. Tyler had to flag down a beat-up pickup truck hauling scrap metal, begging the driver to take them to the outskirts for the few crumpled bills left in his pocket. The image of the dashing VP of days past, now huddled in the dirt-covered truck bed beside his bitter mother, crying sister, and pregnant mistress, was pathetic and tragic beyond words. After nearly 2 hours on that wretched truck, they were dropped at the end of a narrow alley in a rundown boarding house district for manual laborers. The stench of garbage and backed-up sewage hit them immediately, making Tiffany gag and nearly vomit. Patricia covered her nose, wrinkling her face at the crumbling brick walls covered in moss and grime. Nicole, the princess who'd lived in silk, stepped straight into a puddle of black water the moment she got out. She shrieked, crying and screaming that this place was filthy, unfit for human habitation. Tyler shuffled ahead, knocking on doors at a row of tin-roofed boarding houses. With the meager cash scraped together from all 4 of them, he could only afford a single room, barely 150 square feet. The room was dilapidated, walls yellowed with water stains, old floor tiles chipped in large patches. In the corner was a crumbling bathroom with a plastic door half broken, reeking of mold. The ceiling fan creaked and rattled, blowing hot air like an oven. Patricia collapsed onto the dirty floor the moment she entered, wailing. God in heaven, why is my fate so cruel? From a mansion and luxury cars, servants at my beck and call to this stinking rat hole. Tyler, what did you do that your wife could ride roughshod over us, steal everything, and throw us into the street? I'm old, how am I supposed to survive in this earthly hell? Nicole slumped in the corner, face in her hands, sobbing. Tyler, do something. I'm not staying here. Look at my legs, they're covered in mosquito bites. My cards are locked, my phone's out of minutes. How am I supposed to live? Call Lauren apologized to her. Tell her to let us come home. Hearing his sister mention my name, Tyler snapped. He grabbed a broken broom from the corner and hurled it against the wall, roaring like a wounded beast. Shut up, all of you. If you're so brave, go make your own money. Go apologize to her yourselves. You think I'm enjoying this? She fired me. She stripped me of everything. Sealed off my office. It was humiliating. You understand? At the word fired, Tiffany, who'd been leaning against the door frame, jolted. Her eyes went wide, her carefully made-up face turning ashen. She stepped forward and grabbed Tyler's arm, her voice trembling as she fired questions. What do you mean you were fired? You said the company was yours, the shares were yours, that your wife was just a figurehead. You said you were about to be promoted to CEO, that you'd transfer the mansion to us. So what's happening now? You've got nothing? Tyler shoved Tiffany's hand away, clawing at his hair, his eyes bloodshot with desperate veins. He ground his teeth and spat out the bitter truth that laid everything bare. The company is hers. The house is hers. I was just an employee she promoted. This morning, she exposed the shell companies I set up to siphon over $100,000 to buy that apartment for you. Now she's given me exactly 3 days to pay it all back. If I don't, she's handing the file to the district attorney. I'll be wearing an orange jumpsuit. Do you get it now? I'm finished. I've got nothing left. Over $100,000. Prison. Those crushing words slammed into Tiffany's eardrums like thunder tearing open the sky. Every fantasy of a glamorous life as a wealthy man's wife shattered into thousands of fragments. She looked at the man before her, no longer the dashing VP who'd thrown money around, but an unemployed, debt-drowned man about to become a criminal. A deep contempt and calculating depravity began to stir in her mind. Pragmatism always walked hand in hand with ruthlessness. When the mighty tree falls, the parasitic vines quickly find another branch to climb, never willing to sink with the rotting trunk. But Tiffany was a cunning old fox. She knew if she turned on Tyler now, in his deranged state, he might become violent, and she'd lose any chance of salvaging what little assets remained. She immediately shifted her demeanor, putting on a pitiful face, tears welling, and wrapped her arms around Tyler's, cooing softly. Baby, don't lose it. No matter what happens, the baby and I will always be by your side. We'll figure this out. Let's just rest tonight and deal with it tomorrow. Worst case, we sell some old jewelry to get by, then figure out how to negotiate with Lauren. You're my baby's father. I'm not going anywhere. Hearing Tiffany's honeyed comfort, Tyler clung to her like a drowning man grasping a lifeline. He buried his face in her shoulder and wept, believing her. Patricia's rage subsided somewhat. She clicked her tongue, lay down on the hard tile floor, and muttered curses at fate. 4 people crammed into that stifling oven-hot room. Their dinner was nothing but packets of instant ramen eaten dry, chewed reluctantly, washed down with cups of water begged from a neighbor. Night fell. The heat didn't let up. The tin roof radiated the temperature downward, making the air so thick it was hard to breathe. Swarms of hungry mosquitoes whined, leaving red welts on Nicole and Patricia's arms and legs. Tyler, exhausted from the day's traumatic shocks and the long walk, was snoring heavily in a corner, dead to the world. Patricia and Nicole had also collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Only one person in that room remained awake, Tiffany. 2 in the morning. Every sound in the boarding house had sunk into dead silence. Only crickets chirped softly, and the steady breathing of sleepers filled the air. Tiffany sat up slowly, her eyes wide and gleaming in the darkness. She crept forward, step by careful step, avoiding any noise. Her first target was Tyler's pants. Tiffany slipped her hand into his pocket, and pulled out his wallet. Inside was exactly $80 in cash and a few useless credit cards. She curled her lip in contempt and stuffed every bill into her own pocket. Next, she moved to Patricia's black plastic bag. She knew the greedy old woman always hid assets for emergencies. Sure enough, after digging through the pile of old clothes at the bottom, Tiffany found a small bundle wrapped in fabric scraps. Inside was a 24-karat gold chain and a jade ring Patricia had secretly stashed away long ago. Tiffany's eyes flashed with pure greed. She shoved everything quickly into her purse. Asset collection complete. Tiffany stood up, glancing over the 3 sleeping faces on the floor with the coldest, most indifferent look she'd ever worn. From her designer handbag, she withdrew a white envelope. On the front was the stamp of a major maternity hospital. She placed the envelope squarely on Tyler's chest, carefully weighing it down with his empty leather wallet. She threw on a light jacket, grabbed her bag, and quietly lifted the door latch. The hinges creaked softly, not enough to wake the sleepers lost in their dreams. Tiffany melted into the pitch-black night, leaving behind a battlefield, walking away without a backward glance to find a new harbor, a new foolish man to mine for gold. Dawn's first light crept through the broken window, shining directly into Tyler's face. He struggled to open his eyes, his back aching from sleeping on the hard tile floor all night. A dry thirst burned his throat as he scrambled up to find water. But as he sat up, a white envelope slid off his chest and landed on his thigh. Tyler frowned and picked it up. He looked around the room. Patricia and Nicole were still asleep, but Tiffany's spot was empty. Her purse was gone too. A bad feeling shot through him. He frantically checked his pockets. His wallet was completely empty, not a single bill left. Panicking, he tore open the white envelope. Inside was a DNA paternity test report. The printed lines danced before his eyes as he strained to read. Sample A. Alleged father, Tyler Mitchell. Collected from fingernail and hair clippings Tiffany had quietly gathered over time. Sample B. Fetal tissue from Tiffany Chen's pregnancy. Obtained via amniocentesis several months prior. And the final conclusion, printed in bold red ink. Probability of paternity, 0%. Attached to the test results was a small handwritten note from Tiffany. The handwriting was sharp, cold, dripping with ultimate humiliation. Tyler, thanks for funding me and my child these past months, but a man with 0 sperm count, a pathetic infertile guy like you, what right do you have to claim fatherhood over this baby? I don't have time to follow a man who's about to go to prison over $100,000 debt. The cash and your mother's gold, I'm taking those as my travel expenses. Don't bother looking for me. It's pointless. Congratulations on your new title, the greatest cuckold of the year. The earth seemed to stop spinning. The space around Tyler froze solid. He stared unblinking at the test results, his hands shaking violently, cold sweat soaking through the back of his shirt. His heart felt crushed by an invisible hand. Pain, humiliation, and rage surged up to choke him. He, a man who'd always pounded his chest with pride at his virility, who'd never stopped calling his wife a barren, useless woman, had ruthlessly betrayed the woman who'd built everything for him. He'd stolen her hard-earned money to buy homes and cars for his scheming mistress, all because he wanted a child to continue the family line. He'd been so triumphant stroking that pregnant belly, dreaming of a new family, and now the truth was laid bare in the most brutal, humiliating way possible. He was the infertile one. He was the barren one. The baby he cherished with such pride was the blood of some nameless man. The mistress he trusted absolutely had played him for a fool, making him the ultimate cuckold. And when he'd stumbled and fallen, she'd cleaned out the last of his assets and kicked him to the curb like a worthless rag. You bastard, you bitch, you set me up, you dared to set me up, Tyler screamed, tearing his throat raw, the sound carrying the absolute despair and madness of a wild animal driven to the edge. He crumpled the test results in his fist, lunged up, and kicked the old fan into the wall, shattering it. He punched the brick wall repeatedly with both fists, blood oozing from his knuckles, dripping everywhere. He howled, smashing everything around him like a madman. The horrific commotion jolted Patricia and Nicole awake. Seeing Tyler slamming his head against the wall, Patricia scrambled to grab her son. "Tyler, what's wrong?" What happened? Don't Mom's scared, son. Tyler shoved his mother away and threw the crumpled test results at her face. His bloodshot eyes were woven with hatred. Read it yourself. Read it and see whose child your precious grandchild really is. Your darling son is infertile. Do you hear me? I'm the one who can't have kids, not Lauren. We were played by that bitch, Tiffany. She cleaned us out, stole your hidden gold, and ran. She's gone. Patricia's hands trembled as she smoothed out the paper. Her aging eyes squinted at every line. When she saw the conclusion 0% paternity and Tiffany's venomous note, her brain seemed to short-circuit. A pressure seized her chest, blood surged to her head, and her face turned purple. She gasped, eyes rolling back, managing only a strangled cry before collapsing onto the floor, foaming at the mouth, unconscious. The shock was more than a greedy, proud old woman could bear. She suffered a massive stroke right then and there. Mom, oh God help. Tyler, call 911. Nicole shrieked in panic, clutching her mother's convulsing body. But Tyler was in no state to care about anyone. He slumped in the corner, hands clutching his head, letting out maniacal laughter. He'd lost his mind. The brutal truth, the crushing debt, the betrayal by his mistress, and the absolute humiliation had completely shattered his nervous system. He babbled nonsense, tears and snot streaming down his face, pathetic beyond words, lower than a stray dog on the street. Neighbors heard the chaos and crowded around the boarding house door, pointing and whispering, looking at the family that had once called themselves millionaires with the most contemptuous and mocking eyes. No one stepped forward to help because, looking at their wretched, deranged state, everyone was afraid of inviting trouble. From the heights of luxury and arrogance, the Mitchell family had been officially crushed to the very bottom of society's abyss. The net of heaven is wide, its mesh is loose, but nothing escapes. Karma's punishment is never late, and when it falls, it is thorough and brutal, leaving the wicked no path of retreat. 2 days after that horrific night in the slum, the Mitchell family's life had plummeted to the very bottom of the blackest mud. Patricia, after the stroke triggered by learning her precious grandchild was a fraud and all her assets stolen by the mistress, had been rushed by kind-hearted neighbors to a crowded public hospital. The emergency room was overflowing patients lying on stretchers from inside the rooms out into the hallways. Patricia lay on a rusted metal gurney in the corner of the ER corridor. The air reeked of antiseptic, blood, and the sweat of the poor. Half her body was completely paralyzed, her face sagging on one side, her mouth only able to make meaningless sounds. Tyler stood frozen at the billing window, his hands clasped together, shaking uncontrollably. The ER doctor looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and impatience. The doctor explained that the family needed to pay $6,000 up front for emergency treatment, a CT scan, medication to dissolve the blood clot, and immediate intervention. Any delay could cost Patricia her life, or at best, leave her in a permanent vegetative state. $6,000, a number that used to be a casual swipe of Tyler's credit card at a client dinner or a small gift for his mistress. Now it was an insurmountable mountain crushing his mother's last hope of survival. He turned to look at Nicole, his sister standing, huddled in a corner, weeping uncontrollably, her hands clawing at a ragged shirt. She screamed accusations straight into Tyler's heart. Gone was any respect for the brother who'd been a VP. Now, in Nicole's eyes, Tyler was nothing but a disaster that had destroyed their entire family. She cursed him for his philandering, for his stupidity in letting that vixen trick him, for putting their mother in a hospital bed and forcing Nicole herself to starve for 2 days straight. Every curse from Nicole was a knife gouging deeper into Tyler's festering wounds. He turned out every pocket, emptied his old wallet completely. Not a single bill remained. Everything had been taken by that bitch Tiffany. His phone had been disconnected for non-payment. Tyler walked out of the hospital gates like a soulless corpse. The sky above the city suddenly darkened without warning. Black clouds rolled in from the horizon, bringing thunder and lightning that tore through the atmosphere. Then a torrential downpour crashed down, the rain driving into his face, cold and merciless, washing away the last shreds of dignity from a man who'd once called himself a titan. He trudged through the curtain of rain, his designer shoes peeling and flapping. After days of wandering, he walked 10 miles from the suburban hospital, back toward the city center. In his mind, only one image remained, one lifeline he could cling to. Lauren, the wife he'd betrayed, the woman he'd cruelly called barren and useless. He remembered the nights he'd stumbled home dead drunk, and Lauren had stayed up all night making him soup, wiping his face, changing his clothes. He remembered her gentleness and boundless forgiveness over 7 years. A blind, despicable hope flickered to life in his chest. He told himself that women were naturally weak and sentimental. If he just cried, fell to his knees, begged, stirred up some old marital affection, surely Lauren would soften and extend a hand to save his mother and him. Standing before the gates of the city's most exclusive luxury high-rise where I'd moved after throwing his family out of the mansion, Tyler looked like a wet, filthy stray dog. He tried to push past the gleaming gold security gate, but was immediately blocked by 2 massive guards. They looked at him with suspicion, coldly demanding a resident keycard. Tyler fumbled, clasping his hands together, begging the guards, tears mixing with rain streaming down his gaunt face. He claimed to be my husband, pleading with them to call up to my apartment. I was sitting in my penthouse on the top floor, sipping hot chamomile tea, gazing through the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city drowning in rain. The internal phone buzzed. Security reported a man identifying himself as Tyler Mitchell, looking absolutely pathetic, kneeling in the rain outside the main gate, screaming my name repeatedly. I gently set my teacup down and allowed myself a cold smile. The day had finally come, the day the dog that had bitten its master had to crawl at my feet, begging for survival. I let the satisfaction seep into every cell, then calmly instructed security. Don't let him inside the lobby. Let him kneel in the rain. I would come down myself to end this once and for all. I draped my luxurious black cashmere coat over my shoulders and stepped into the private elevator reserved for penthouse residents. Beside me stood Attorney Jonathan, briefcase loaded with legal documents that would determine the fate of my enemy. When the lobby doors opened, a gust of cold, damp air hit my face, but it couldn't shake the dignity of a queen descending to deliver her final judgment. A security guard opened a large black umbrella, shielding me from the driving rain. I stopped at the top of the front steps, my sharp gaze cutting down to the figure collapsed in the puddle below. Tyler lifted his head. His eyes met mine. A contrast of absolute extremes was exposed between 2 people who'd once called each other husband and wife. I stood there radiant, proud, untouchable at the pinnacle of power, and he knelt in a puddle, clothes soaked and caked with mud, trembling like a dry leaf about to be swept into a storm drain. Seeing me appear, Tyler's eyes lit up like he'd struck gold. He dragged his knees across the rough pavement toward the steps, reaching out to grab my stiletto heel. Instantly, the 2 guards stepped forward, kicking him hard in the shoulder, sending him sprawling backward, blocking any attempt to touch me. Lauren, please, help me. I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Tyler howled, his cries echoing with the rumbling thunder. That vixen tricked me. She took everything and ran. You were right. I'm an idiot. I'm infertile. The baby wasn't mine. She made me a cuckold. Lauren. He slapped himself repeatedly. The smacks rang out sharply through the heavy rain. He was putting on the finest performance of his miserable life. My mother's in the emergency room. The doctors say without $6,000 for treatment, she'll die. Lauren, please save her. She was your mother-in-law, after all. For the sake of our 7 years of marriage, just throw me some money to save my mom. I'm begging you, from now on, I'll be your slave. I'll do anything you say. Give me a chance to come home. I can't live without you. I stood in silence, my eyes unyielding, watching his performance with absolute contempt. The 7-year marriage he kept bringing up, how laughable. When he was sleeping with his mistress, when he was plotting to steal my company, when he was humiliating me as a barren, useless woman, that sacred bond had already been tossed in the trash by his own hands. I signaled the guards to step back. I moved forward to the edge of the steps and spoke, my voice cold and sharp, cutting through the pouring rain. You can't live without me, or you can't live without my money. You're crying like this not because you regret betraying me, but because it hurts to realize you're just a cuckold who got played. If your mistress hadn't stolen the money and run, if that baby had really been yours, would you be kneeling in the rain at my feet right now? Or would you be lounging in some luxury apartment, cursing my name? Every word was a surgical scalpel, slicing precisely into the darkest, ugliest depths of his soul. Tyler's throat locked. His lips moved, but no words came. His eyes revealed nothing but defeat and shame. He knew I'd seen through every dirty scheme, leaving him not a single shield to hide behind. I once sold my inheritance for you. I endured hundreds of agonizing injections for you. But you used my sacrifice to trample me, to feed your own depravity and greed. Now you're using your elderly mother to manipulate my conscience. When she was gobbling down bird's nest soup bought with my money to nourish a fake grandchild, did she think about my survival? You reap what you sow. You chose this path. Don't expect me to play savior to your rotten souls. I turned to Attorney Jonathan and nodded. He opened his briefcase and withdrew a document folder sealed in clear plastic to protect it from the rain. He threw it hard into the puddle directly in front of Tyler. Listen carefully, I declared clearly. Inside is a divorce decree I've already signed, along with a promissory note for the $120,000 you embezzled from the company. This is your one and only chance. Sign the divorce papers, walk away with nothing, and take on the debt. I'll allow you to work it off over 10 years manual labor, hauling freight, construction, whatever it takes to pay back every cent. I paused for a second, my killer gaze pinning Tyler's bloodless face. And if you don't sign, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp, your embezzlement file lands on the district attorney's desk. You'll be arrested immediately for fraud and theft. A restraining order will be issued. You'll rot in prison, and your mother and sister will die in the street with no one to collect their bodies. Your choice. The death sentence had been pronounced. The choice between scraping by like a beast of burden for 10 years to repay a debt or a prison sentence that would destroy his entire life. Tyler's trembling hands lifted the folder from the puddle. Rain and tears blurred his vision. He looked up at me, his eyes holding nothing but despair, resentment, and absolute powerlessness. He understood that the woman standing before him was no longer a wife he could manipulate. She was a queen holding absolute power over his life and death. Are you really this ruthless, Lauren? After everything, he forced out his final, desperate words. Sign now. Don't make me call the police this instant. My patience for filth is extremely limited. I cut him off coldly, leaving no crack for mercy to slip through. Tyler's hand shook violently. He pulled a cheap, rain-soaked pen from his pocket. No way out. Under the pouring rain, witnessed by security guards and the yellow glow of streetlights, the former VP had to grit his teeth and squeeze out his signature on the divorce papers and the debt acknowledgement. Each stroke a permanent stamp of humiliating defeat, officially ending a marriage built on deception and exploitation. He pushed the folder back toward Attorney Jonathan. The lawyer carefully picked it up, verified the signatures, and nodded confirmation to me. All legal formalities complete. The ghost of the past had been severed permanently. I stood tall, adjusting the lapels of my coat, looking down at the man groveling in the puddle with my final shred of pity. I've forgiven myself for my own stupidity, and I've taken back everything you stole from me. From tomorrow on, your life is a chain of atonement. You can keep living in your poverty and humiliation, taste the suffering you once so mercilessly poured on my head. But right now, get out of my sight. Don't ever let your filthy shoes stain the steps of my home for another second. I turned my back and walked steady and proud through the lobby doors. The glass panels slid shut behind me, completely separating the warm, luxurious world inside from the brutal storm outside. Through the transparent glass, I could still see Tyler collapsed face down in the puddle, hands covering his face, howling in madness. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the pathetic figure of a man with nothing left, no future, no way back. His life, from this moment forward, was permanently submerged in darkness, with no dawn to come. Time passed in a flash. A full year had gone by since that stormy night when I'd personally cleaned every piece of trash named Mitchell out of my life. A year isn't long in the span of a lifetime, but it was enough to create a seismic shift, a total divergence between two worlds, one side a blazing heaven of freedom, the other a dark hell of karma. The city entered the golden days of early summer. At the largest national convention center, An international contract signing ceremony was underway in an atmosphere of absolute grandeur. Under crystal chandeliers and dozens of media cameras, I stepped up to the podium of honor. Today I wore a pure white evening gown, hand-tailored to perfection, accentuating every graceful line and the proud bearing of a woman in power. My face no longer showed the wrinkles of worry, the dark circles from sleepless nights serving my husband's family. Instead, my skin was luminous, my eyes bright, my smile radiant, the face of a woman standing at the pinnacle of success. My fashion conglomerate had just beaten out a field of formidable competitors to win a contract supplying and designing uniforms for a chain of 5-star European hotels. The deal, worth tens of millions of dollars, didn't just cement my company's dominant market position. It was ironclad proof that once a woman sheds her toxic burdens, she can soar like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Applause thundered through the auditorium as I signed my name on the contract. The foreign partner's CEO smiled, shook my hand firmly, and showered me with praise for my talent and tenacity. I accepted the accolades with quiet pride. If, a year ago, I'd been drowning in the mud of contempt called a barren, useless woman by my faithless husband, now I was an inspiration to thousands of women on the path of entrepreneurship and financial independence. While I was raising a champagne glass to celebrate victory in a room overflowing with flowers and music, in a dark, forgotten corner of the city's outskirts, certain people were paying the highest possible price for their betrayal and bottomless greed. The midday June sun blazed down on a dusty construction site. Tyler, the man who'd once pounded his chest as VP, who'd worn designer cologne and luxury watches, was now bent double under a 100-pound bag of concrete mix. His once fair skin was dark and leathery from sun exposure. His hands, which had only known signing documents and caressing mistresses, were now calloused and cracked, knuckles oozing blood, nails caked with dirt. He staggered across a wooden scaffold, his spine bent as if about to snap under the weight. He ground his teeth, gasping for breath, sweat soaking through his ragged safety vest, giving off a sour stench. "Move it, deadbeat! You crawling like a turtle on vacation? I'm paying you to haul, not take a walk on the scaffold." The construction foreman bellowed, kicking the air in threat. Tyler bit his lip until it bled, not daring to talk back. He kept his head down and moved forward. At lunch, he huddled in a sliver of shade beside a pile of broken bricks, holding a grimy boxed lunch, a few strands of soggy vegetables, and a tasteless slab of tofu. He chewed mechanically, forcing every dry bite down his throat while tears leaked from his eyes, salty and bitter. He remembered the lavish banquets, the bowls of shark fin soup I used to bring him in bed. Every day, laboring from dawn to midnight, he earned barely $40. Half of that had to be sent to my company account to pay down his $120,000 debt. If he missed a monthly payment, the prison sentence would immediately descend on his head. His life was now no different from an ox in a yoke, carrying the shackles of debt and contempt. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew an old newspaper against his ruined shoe. He bent down to pull it free, and his entire body went rigid, as if electrocuted. The front page of the business section featured a photograph of me radiant and confident, receiving the award for Female Entrepreneur of the Year. The headline praised my fashion empire in glowing terms. Tyler stared at the photo, his filthy hands shaking violently. He crumpled the newspaper, pressed his face into his knees, and broke down in heaving sobs. The most agonizing regret gnawed at his insides. He'd thrown away a priceless diamond to pick up a shattered pebble. He destroyed an extraordinary wife only to reap deception and humiliation. But in this world, there is no cure for regret. Not far from the construction site, in the greasy back kitchen of a cheap diner, Patricia was dragging her paralyzed leg, sitting on a low plastic stool, washing a mountain of dishes caked with oil and grease. The woman who'd once declared she'd only wear designer labels, who'd tried to swipe a card for $20,000 worth of diamonds, now wore a faded Hauser dress, her hair a tangled mess of white, looking like a beggar. She used her bony, wrinkled hands, blue veins protruding to scrub each porcelain plate. The cheap dish soap ate at her skin, leaving it raw and peeling, burning down to the bone. Suddenly, her left hand, damaged by the stroke, lost its grip. A plate slipped and crashed to the tile floor, shattering into pieces. Good Lord, another one. What kind of work is this? One day's wages won't even cover what you break. Can't even wash dishes properly. Useless. The diner owner stormed out, hands on hips, verbally tearing into Patricia with the most vicious words. Patricia bowed low, trembling as she picked up the shards, mumbling apologies through her tears. The dirty dishwater soaked her already stained dress. In her mind flashed the image of the riverfront mansion, the days when I'd given her $4,000 a month in spending money, when she'd had servants and fine food and beautiful clothes. She remembered my cold eyes the day I'd thrown them out. She'd been the one egging her son into adultery. She'd been the one despising me for being barren. And in the end, the grandchild was a fraud, and her only son had become a laborer, crushed by the consequences of her own sins. Now she had to spend her final years in sickness and poverty, paying back every cent. And Nicole, the parasite sister, after her funding was cut, had to taste the brutal reality of society. Without a degree, without skills, and burdened by natural laziness, she could only get hired as a janitor at the very shopping mall where, a year ago, she used to strut around in designer dresses, posting Instagram photos. Her fingers, once adorned with crystal-encrusted manicures, now gripped a mop and bucket, scrubbing floors, hauling trash, cleaning foul public restrooms. The fake friends from her socialite circle who used to flatter her now walked past, covering their noses, giggling behind their hands in contempt. Nicole could only keep her head down, silently swallowing the bitter lump of humiliation. A family that had once arrogantly trampled on my love and sacrifice was now flailing in the deepest, filthiest mud of their lives. No force in the world could save them because they'd destroyed every escape route with their own hands. As for me, after settling all accounts, I cleared away every shadow of sorrow and began a new chapter. I spent more time on myself, traveling the world, honoring my birth parents, the people I'd unintentionally neglected during 7 years lost in a blind marriage. I came to understand that a woman's worth isn't measured by whether she can keep a husband, nor by whether she can produce an heir for his family. A woman's value lies in her independence, her intelligence, and her ability to stand on her own 2 feet even if the sky falls. One clear autumn morning, I visited an orphanage on the outskirts of the city, and there fate smiled on me once more. I met a 6-year-old girl with round, dark eyes and a smile as gentle as an angel's. She'd been abandoned at birth, carrying within her the purest heart imaginable. The moment her tiny hand reached up to touch my cheek and she called me Mommy, my heart melted. Every ounce of pain from not being able to conceive naturally vanished into nothing. I completed the adoption paperwork and named her Emma. My home was now filled with children's laughter. In the evenings, I cooked her favorite meals, braided her hair, helped her with homework. Without a deceitful man, without a toxic in-law family, I'd built the most complete and loving home imaginable. My destiny as a mother hadn't been stolen, it simply arrived later, and in a more magical way than I ever could have imagined. One weekend evening, I was driving my convertible with little Emma beside me, cruising through the city. The car stopped at a red light. By pure coincidence, on the other side of the intersection, I spotted a gaunt figure in a faded safety vest, struggling to push a cart loaded with scrap metal. It was Tyler. He was straining to push the cart up a small incline, drenched in sweat, looking so broken that if I hadn't looked carefully, I'd never have recognized the dashing husband I once had. As if sensing my gaze, Tyler lifted his head. Through the stream of traffic, his eyes met mine. He saw me radiant, glamorous, seated in a luxury car. He saw little Emma beside me, laughing and chattering happily. In his cloudy eyes flashed a moment of shock, pain, and desperate longing. He instinctively released the cart and took a step toward me, his lips moving to form my name in silent agony. But I didn't care. I looked away, gently tucked a strand of hair blowing in the breeze behind my ear, and allowed myself a serene smile. The light turned green. I pressed the accelerator, and the car glided forward, leaving the faithless man disappearing into the dust and noise of the city behind me. Between us now lay 2 parallel lines that would never intersect again. After all the ups and downs, I finally understood a profound truth. Women are born to be flowers, even if they're crushed into the mud, as long as their roots remain stubbornly anchored. they will one day rise and bloom in the most brilliant display imaginable. Never be afraid to take a knife and cut out the malignant tumors named betrayers, because ruthlessness toward the ungrateful is the greatest act of compassion you can show your own life. The story closes with the image of Lauren, smiling as she greets the radiant sunlight. You see, my friends, sometimes being ruthless to those who betray you is the greatest kindness you can show yourself. Women are born to be cherished. Never bow your head to those who don't deserve you. So what do you think of how Lauren handled things? Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next story.